little bit about my background. I got in law enforcement, well, I grew up, my grandfather was the fire chief of Saratoga. And now Saratoga, if you know, is a little crossroads, you know, we have got a stoplight. And we still have it, I don't know why, but we still do. But anyway, Saratoga couldn't afford a mascot, so they had me. I grew up in that fire department, and you know, most kids were playing sports and everything else. I was at the fire station, and my granddaddy, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. Well, that led me into, I got into EMS at a later, and as a teenager, and then that led in, I was hanging around. I always wanted to be a police officer. And anyway, that led into law enforcement. And so at 19, I was actually hired at the sheriff's office in Wilson. Lewis Total was sheriff at the time. I was a part-time dispatcher, and I thought I was, you know, that was getting my foot in the door. And I was tickled to death. And then when I was 20, I was sworn in as a deputy sheriff. That's when, this is before we even had 911. If you needed a sheriff's office, you called the sheriff's office. And so, but anyway, at 20, I became a deputy. I turned 21 while I was in basic law enforcement training. And so I went on the road. I spent 5 years as a deputy sheriff here in Wilson. I then became a detective. I was a detective here for 5 years with the sheriff's office, and worked all kinds of crimes. And then in 1998, I had an opportunity to go to work for the State Division of Motor Vehicles, License and Theft. And I was the inspector that was assigned to Wilson County. I was fortunate, I was stationed right back here in Wilson County when I went to work for the state. I worked here for 5 years, and then in 1998, they asked me to come to Raleigh and help with a project. And so I went up there, and the very next day, I was in the legislature and working on a bill. As a matter of fact, it was the DWIC's vehicle bill. And so, you know, you're talking a boy from Saratoga being thrown into over there at the legislature and having to go before the committees and all. And so I have the utmost respect for Representative Martin. I've seen what they go through. But anyway, it was a great experience for me. And that's one thing that I feel like that I've got the experience. I always wanted to be sheriff, but I feel like that my background has really helped me. When I was in Raleigh, the first job I had, I was over the vehicle theft section for the division. And then I was promoted to assistant director in 2003. And I was over vehicle theft, dealer enforcement, fraud. And then in 2009, I was promoted to deputy director, and I was actually the #2 person in charge of all field operations. We had 202 sworn law enforcement officers, investigators that go out and investigate motor vehicle crime, and title fraud, driver's license fraud, you know, anything motor vehicle theft related, we're involved in. And we had an operating budget of about $14 million. So it was a great opportunity for me. And the big thing that I felt that working with a state agency, I've got 15 years in what I consider in the field law enforcement, but then I also I feel like I've got experience in managing an agency. And not only with managing the agency, but also it was good being in Raleigh because I was exposed, I had to work with the legislature. And as Representative Martin knows, that it's, you know, every bill that would come before us, we had to look at it and see what the impact's going to be on our agency, the physical impact, the technology, and you know, whether the laws were, you know, and now I'm going to tell her this with her being in the room. As a state employee, our lives changed in January because we had to have an 8-hour turnaround. I don't know if y'all realize over there, but any bill that gets introduced, the agency, whichever agency it has impact on, we have to do a physical study. It has to be done within 8 hours so we can get it back to our people, so it goes back to physical research, and there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And two, I think a lot of constituent calls come over to us. And one thing about being in Raleigh, people didn't call me to say hello. They called because they had a problem. And I'm used to handling problems, so getting back to that, that was one of the things that I enjoyed about working with the state and all. But like I said, in 2012, I retired. I had 30 years of service. But I felt that I still wanted to do something in law enforcement. I always dreamed of being sheriff of Wilson. Wilson was my home. And so I've come back here to fulfill a lifelong dream. And, you know, our present sheriff, he's a nice guy. I can't say anything bad about him. You know, I wish I could tell you all these horror stories, but you know, I did look at what he was doing, and I felt that, you know, I could do a better job at it, and that's one of the reasons why I'm running. one of the things that you know, that I'd like to do as sheriff, I think that one of the things we've kind of lost contact with up there is that the men and women of that sheriff's office are its greatest asset. And we've got to do something we've got a pay discrepancy with our people. We've also got a little bit of a morale issue that we're losing. We've lost over 70 deputies in the time period that Mr. Woodard has been sheriff of Wilson County. And we've got a huge pay discrepancy with the police department. Our deputies can leave and go to the police department, make about $7,000, $7,000 to $8,000 more a year, depending on their education level. And so that's one of the things that I do want to work with the county commissioners on, is establishing a comprehensive pay plan where we can look at looking at our budget and finding the money to fund these salary, you know, where a deputy has been there for a certain amount of time and has achieved a certain amount of training, that we can go in and look at doing something to increase his pay and all that. Of course, too, we want to increase the working standards. We want to have, they don't have a policy procedure right now. They need to understand and know what their job responsibilities are. And so that's some of the stuff that's another thing that I'd like to do. The biggest thing too, if you'll notice, I passed out a card a while ago, and I've said on here a new beginning of cooperation. I believe in cooperation. I mean, in my experience, I was fortunate that I was able, at working with a state agency, I did a lot of traveling. I've been all over the state. And Wilson County, we're fortunate here in Wilson in that we have got a centralized, you know, the community, the county seat is centrally located. We can be anywhere in this county in just a few minutes. And actually, now the city limits actually go out to 264, 995, about, you know, 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the county line. We've got to be working with the police department here. And I just don't see that occurring right now. And one of the things that I'd like to do, I'd like to see us form another city-county joint drug task force. I think that's vitally important so that we're able to combine our resources, not only for drugs, but for other crimes as well. But, you know, I see in forensics right now, you know, CSI, we all like watching CSI on TV. And, you know, all that stuff's expensive. And if the sheriff's office is buying it and the police department is buying it, if we look at going in together and we can have some of this good equipment that we need for everyone, and that's something I believe in cooperation. And I've talked to the chief of police, and he's in a position where he's not going to get involved. But I've reassured him that if I'm elected sheriff, that we do intend on, I'm going to work with him on things of that nature. The other thing that I'd like to do is that we have kind of missed the boat on is that we're not working with the Federal Drug Enforcement Administration. If any of you saw the paper, today's paper in Wilson, there was a guy out of Middlesex that was arrested and got a life sentence. He was a Wiggins guy, lived up on 231 right outside of Middlesex, around a salvage yard. Major drug trafficker, and he got a life sentence. And the thing that was amazing to me about it is that this investigation was conducted by the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Raleigh Police Department, the Nash County Sheriff's Office, the Person County Sheriff's Office, and the Wilson Police Department. But nowhere was the Sheriff's Office, you know. And you know, and that's disturbing to me. And what was the most disturbing is the reason the Person County Sheriff's Office was involved with it is because he used to be a deputy here, and Mr. Woodard dismissed him. And he went to work for Person County, and he still lives here in Wilson, but he's on a federal drug task force. And we're losing assets that way as well. You know, this administration here has not received any drug asset forfeiture money in the last 2 years. The first full year he was sheriff, he did get $10,000. In the partial year he was there, he's got $33.12, I think it is. And I've got the figures here. But in that same amount of time, the Wilson Police Department has received over $368,000 in drug asset forfeiture money by working cases with the federal government and getting longer sentences. And that's what's most important, because, you know, these drug offenders now out here, you know, anytime we can go federally, we can get longer sentences. And that we got to send a message out there. We got to stop the trafficking and flow of drugs. Now, I commend the sheriff's office for, you know, you read a lot in the paper, but these dealers that they're dealing with, when you arrest someone and you immediately, if you arrest somebody today, you put their picture in the paper tomorrow morning and it's blasted all over the news, that person's not telling you anything else about where they're getting those drugs from. And what we've got to be doing is we've got to be making those arrests, but we've got to be working those offenders and finding out where that drug is coming from, who's providing it to them, the trafficking. Just like this guy here, this Wiggins guy was bringing in narcotics into Wilson County. Well, that's one guy off the street. We're not going to have to worry about him anymore, you know. And now we can move on to somewhere else. And then obviously with the DEA involved, they can go further into bringing the drugs actually into the country, you know. So we've got to work together on things of that nature. You know, I believe, I told you before, I believe in public service. I want to make the sheriff's office accessible to everyone. You know, no one ever called, I said it, I may have repeated myself, no one ever called me to say hello. In 14 years of being in Raleigh, they may have been pleasant at first, but the next thing they say, well, hey, by the way, I got a problem. I'm used to solving problems. I want to do that here, and I want to be available. You know, I want to work with all these different groups. We got Wesley Shelter, we got all these different victims' rights groups, and we want to work with them and make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect the people of Wilson. I want to ensure that the sheriff's office personnel are, you know, that they treat victims of crime with respect and understanding. You know, and I think the men and women up there do an outstanding job, but we need to instill that in them, that they know that to follow up with everybody's concerns, because we're public servants. That's what it's all about. I'm going to tell you a real quick story, and this is something I want to make sure that the deputies understand. Campaigning, and I appreciate Mr. Fulford's prayer tonight, because it does. You know, this has been one of those things. There's not a book that tells you how to do it. You know, and I've been a law enforcement officer for 30 years. Now I'm going to sit up here and I'm going to say something, and everyone is going to say, well, I'm not a politician. Well, I'm not. I hate to say it, because I know I'm running for office. I reckon that does make me a politician, but I don't know how to do this, you know. I know how to enforce the law. And, you know, in this thing of being a Democrat or Republican, I have answered the phone one way for 30 years, and that's how may I help you, and I'm going to continue to answer that way. We don't, if you call 911, we don't say, what's your party affiliation, or what's your social status? We go, you know. And and that's been the hard thing about this. But, you know, in campaigning, I had a Friday, and I'm just going to tell you, it's been about a month ago. I've been told I was doing too much, I wasn't doing enough. One man even told me I need to leave town and not come back in October. So, but this Friday afternoon had been a bad day, and I went in this business. And when I walked in the business, I recognized this person. And I said, oh my gosh, this is not good. Because I dealt with this person, and I remember it was 30 years ago. Because I turned 52 August the 5th. And I remember dealing with this person, and I remember there was a couple things that made me remember it. And I can tell you where I was at, the whole 9 yards. And I thought, well, we're just going to make a bad day get worse. And so they were on the phone, actually. So they got off the phone, and when they got off the phone, I told them, I introduced myself. I said, I'm Joey Gardner, I'm running for sheriff in Wilson County. I just want to stop by and introduce myself. Well, the first thing out of their mouth was, you don't remember me, do you? And so then I said, now here's the politician in me. I said, well, you do look familiar, but I can't quite place you. And when they said that, then the next thing out of their mouth, and I'm not tooting my horn when I say this, but they said, you saved my life 30 years ago. Well, you know, that was one of those experiences when I got back in the truck. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's been a bad day. And I called my dad, and I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, but what it made me realize, and I've known it too, but you know, you as an officer out here, and I was 22 years old at the time. You know, I may have gotten 10 or 15 calls a day. I don't know, you know, at that time what we were getting. But every person you come in contact with, you got to remember in the back of your mind that they may remember you 30 years from now. And I met with a young officer the other day, and I told him that. I said, you know, you've got to keep that in your mind. And you know, you can't tell that to nobody at 22. You realize that when you become 52. And that's what I want to instill in these officers up there. And I think they do. Listen, There's some great people up there. They're in a bad situation because the way a sheriff's office works, you serve at the pleasure of a sheriff. And so, but, you know, my goal is to go up there and have an efficient office. You know, I want deputies that are going to work hard, do their jobs, and go out here and protect the people of Wilson. And I'm going to do everything I can to work for them as well as the citizens of Wilson County. And that's about me. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Talk to me about animal control.
Okay. Well, animal control is one of those issues. It's you know, very hot topic in Wilson County right now. One of the biggest thing that I see with animal control is that you know, you have the law, and I understand the law, but animal control is different from any aspect of law enforcement in that you've got so many people in different animal groups that are willing, rescue groups to come in and help you. One of the things is that I want to open that shelter up. I want to make sure that we are getting volunteer. I've gone and visited other counties and seen how they operate a volunteer program. I want to, the first thing I want to do is to get back to a group, an advisory group, with people, different people from all the different rescue groups. And because I think that, you know, obviously we can follow the law. I understand about the law, but when I've got people that are willing to come up and help us run that animal shelter, I'm going to seek their help. And I'm going to seek their input and advice because some of them know far more about it than I do. I've got a lot to learn about animal enforcement. I really do. But yet when we've got experts and people willing to help, I want to seek that help and input. Get the assistance from the animal, you know, from the different rescue groups. You know, we need to be doing things like, right now, for instance, you can't even carry a cell phone and a camera in the animal shelter. You know, what I want to do is every time we pick an animal up, I want to go ahead and take a picture, put it out there. And I'm the least one, we were talking about Facebook earlier. I'm trying to get more into Facebook because it is the thing out here, but what we want to do is establish something. And I've done this with my website, is that we've tied the website into Facebook. We need to do that at the sheriff's office. We need to be doing everything we can to get these dogs, if we get a dog or an animal or a cat, back to their rightful owner, and if not, then to get it adopted. You know, there's so many groups coming from up north here. It's almost a weekly, daily thing where we're carrying animals up north. We need to, you know, I would like to say that I hope we can never, you know, I wish we never had to euthanize another animal. I can't tell you that'll never happen, you know. I know, unfortunately, there's going to be times when we're going to have to do that. And one of the things is that I just don't think that I've looked at research, I've gone to Johnston County, I see how they do it. I think one of the first things I'm going to try to do is get the people trained to make sure we can do it by lethal injection. I don't think the gas chamber is I've done some research. There's only like 4 counties still doing that in North Carolina. We have to be one of them. And so that's one of the things I want to look at redoing. You know, we've got to be working with everybody to try to get these animals adopted, you know, that's how I'm looking at it, you know, just seeking people's input. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about a real life scenario that happened to us out in the country about 6 years ago. There was a gang of young folks out late at night, you know, just robbing, picking up everything that wasn't bolted down. They were going up and down each road from house to house, and this particular night they were in our neighborhood. And they went into our shed, which is not a locked thing, and it had some valuable things in it. So we lost maybe $1,100, $1,200 worth of merchandise. And the next day, you know, the sheriff's department came out and did the investigation and wrote up the report, you know, so we could file insurance and that kind of thing. And after they left that day, we never heard another word. Now I called to the sheriff's department 3 times because I knew somebody who was an investigator there, and I kept calling just to see if anything had happened. One of the things that was stolen was a gun that was special to my husband because his dad had left it to the older brother, and then the older brother left it to Buddy. And he just carelessly left it in the shed that night because he had shot some animal, something in the yard that day, and went and set it in and forgot to take it inside. So it wasn't so much the monetary value as the sentimental value. But my question to you is, if Joey Gardner were sheriff, is there anything that would have been done differently? How would you have handled it?
Well, first of all, I would hope and pray that they would have followed up with you. And that's one of the things that was instilled in me when I got into law enforcement. And and I hate that. I wish I could sit up here and tell you that if I'm elected sheriff, I'm going to solve every crime in this county. I can't make that promise to you. But what I can make a promise to you is that we're going to follow up with your needs and concerns, and to ensure that that you should have been taught to. That's the thing of it. When I was a detective, that was one of the quickest ways we could get in trouble, is to not follow up with people and talk to them. And even as a deputy, and that's one of the things I enjoyed about being a deputy sheriff. I was, sometimes as police officers, they have so many calls in there in one little area of beat, and they just take a report and that's it. It was instilled in me when I first started, we did everything. We tried to follow up as much as we could with doing the initial investigation and everything else. And yes ma'am, following up, that's going to be, like I said, it's on this card here when I want to make sure that victims, they understand, who's assigned the case and to follow up and everything else, so it's utmost important.
Yeah, and as far as I know, none of the people involved were ever arrested in Wilson County. They were arrested in Wayne County. So is there an issue there? I mean, if you're arrested in one county, can you not be arrested in another one for the crimes that you committed?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, and I hate that it looks like to me if they were charged in Wayne County, they should have been charged over here. I don't understand why that didn't happen. Yeah. If the evidence was there and all that. Yes, sir.
Last year, when all the weapons ban talk was heating up again, and bullets were flying off the shelf, everything, I know there was an effort to get Sheriff Woodard out here to talk about that, his stance, and so I know for a lot of people that's a big issue. So can you talk about your feelings on the Second Amendment and how strongly you feel about it?
Well, I mean, obviously I support the Second Amendment, and as a law enforcement officer, I have a job to uphold. If you go in my campaign office right now, I hold my oath of office. It's hanging on the wall. I've always considered it sacred because I swore to uphold the law. I was aware of all that talk about, possibly the administration would send down a directive that sheriffs would go out and take weapons. Personally, I don't think that'll ever happen. I hope and pray it never happens. I think you got to look at, there's a discretionary, I think in anything, there's a discretionary issue. And my job, the way I look at gun control and everything else, gun control, we need to be focusing on the criminals that are committing crimes with, responsible gun ownership, and we need to be focusing on the criminals that are committing crimes with guns. That's what we need to be focusing on. And the rights of citizens to own weapons. It's just like, I kind of equate that to what happened. I've been a deputy a long time. I was a deputy back when you couldn't carry concealed, quite frankly. And I'll never forget it. I was out at 42 one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, an alarm went off. It was on a Saturday night. And one of the store owners pulled up, and when he got out of the car, he had a gun with him. And he told me, he said, I've got a gun in that car right now. He said, would you arrest me? I said, no, sir. I said, because why are you out here? He said, you're out here because I called you. I said, now, if you were drunk, leaving a bar, raising Cain, and I pulled you over, you got in a fight, and you had that gun, yeah, I'd probably arrest you for carrying concealed weapon. I said, but you're out here, you're a law-abiding citizen. That's the way I look at that. And I think you've got to, like I said, I don't think it'll ever come to that. And I hope and pray, of course, if we can get another president up there, we won't have that to worry about. You know what I'm saying? That's the key to it right now. But, I think that people are going to have discretion. And, there's a lot of laws on the book, but there's also discretion. And I believe in common sense and discretion. And I'm going to target people that are committing crime because I put it to you like that. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned your oath to the law, uphold the law. It really is to uphold the Constitution. There are laws that are not constitutional. So where do you esteem the Constitution?
Well, as an officer, I've got to do what is passed on to me. But you've got to look at the Constitution. Well, no, I wouldn't say regardless. But you got to understand, you've got the Constitution. And then you do have, when a directive or something comes down, an order or a court order or something of that nature, But I think there is discretion, and I think in a situation like that, you know, I don't foresee that happening without it going through appeals and everything else. And I think we've got, you know, I think we've got enough safeguards in this country right now, it wouldn't get that far. I hope and pray our Constitution would uphold it before we got to that.
Well,
And
we've got a bunch of unconstitutional things going on in our government right now.
Yeah, but
We're very
I really,
concerned.
yeah, and like I said, but I do think when it got down to it, I think it would be a matter of discretion, you know. And, you know, it would be hard pressed for me, if we get that bad, we're gonna have a lot of problems. And, you know, I don't foresee it happening. I'm gonna be honest with you. I hope and pray that our judicial system with the Supreme Court and you know, with all the different stays and all that, and I believe, you know, I believe we would be fighting it, you know, on the state level. I think we would be coming in there and filing appeals and everything else, you know, in stays. So it's going to be a hard day before Joey goes and takes a gun from a law-abiding citizen. I'm going to put it like that. Yes, sir.
Actually, Joe, I have a favor and a question.
Okay.
I'd like for you to elaborate a little bit on that forfeiture money and the $33 you were talking about, exactly how that works and where that come from.
Okay. I've got it right here, actually. What happens in North Carolina under the Constitution, anything that's seized in North Carolina and it's received related to a state charge, the fines and forfeiture go to the school board system. And so if anything is seized pursuant to a federal indictment, those federal indictments, the money can be shared with law enforcement for the use of fighting, for equipment purchase, for the use of fighting crime, you know. And so, you know, it's somewhat, I hate to say it, but we all know there's money in narcotics.
Oh yeah.
And so when you look at that, in law enforcement, you know, if we go in here and if we arrest this guy and he's got houses, vehicles, cash money, then that money is subject to forfeiture. And so what I want to do is to be involved in these federal prosecutions so we can go in and get that money, that we can bring that money back into Wilson County to help fight drugs and to help purchase vehicles, equipment, so it doesn't have the taxpayers of Wilson County don't have to pay for it, you know. And we can use that money to upend our budget. And I'll pass this around if anybody would like to look at it, but right here's the information that I received from the county. This is the asset forfeiture account, and it's the monies collected. And you'll see in 2012 and 13, it's blank. There was none. And then here's the letter that I received from the Wilson Police Department when I asked at the same time from 2010 through 14, they had 368,597. So that's a little bit how that asset forfeiture works.
Well, I guess my question, if you're involved in a drug bust with multiple agencies, do all those agencies involved get a part of that money?
Yes, a percentage, right.
They don't have to do anything special to get it. It just
Well,
all
they
gets
have
distributed?
they have to be involved. I mean, not necessarily
Well, I'm saying
just pull up. They
yeah.
have to be involved in the investigation. They have to show that they have committed resources to it. You know, just like in this investigation that was in the paper today, you know, all those agencies have put resources with men involved in it, and they have contributed to that investigation. The other thing, too, that will happen in these federal cases is that the federal government will pay for overtime. If it's a case that they decide to adopt, then we can supplement our budget. Now, we can't use that money to supplement salary, but we can use it to supplement overtime pay for a specific investigation that the U.S. Attorney has agreed to take.
Okay. So the only way to not have forfeiture money is the one, you're doing drug bust where there's no money involved, or two, you're just not doing them.
Well, you're just not doing it. And I can tell you that
because there's normally always
there's
money.
nobody on the task force here from Wilson County.
Okay.
Did you say that the amount of money, what year was that? The last 2 years, is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am. The last 2 years has been absolutely nothing.
Okay, well, your opponent ran, that was one of his will do's, federal arrest, to get that done, the money.
Right.
And so you're saying it did not happen?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I'm a speak on animal control and money a little bit. When Wayne Gay was in office, he spoke of developing the funds to help animal control better our pound or extend it and make it larger and nicer. It's like you said, you're not allowed to even take pictures in there because now think of how horrid it probably is for these animals. That funding came about and then it disappeared into the general fund. That was a thing Calvin Woodard said he was going to stick by and bring it back, and it disappeared back into the general fund, which pays for God knows whatever. So what is your stance on that, taking money set aside to help part of our community to get put into the general funds for God knows what?
I think from what I know about the animal tax when it was enacted, I've talked to a couple of the commissioners, and Chris and Roger Lucas. Roger has found the minutes where when that ordinance was enacted, that the money was supposed to go into that special fund. It was not supposed to go into the general fund. And I think, listen, I'm going to do something. I don't really think that was Mr. Woodard. I think that was actually Ellis Williford, the county manager. He's the one that decided that that money would go into the general fund. And so I think that's an issue. I do believe the commissioners are about to address that. So I don't know if let me say this. We've got some great guys running for commissioners. I have really got to know Chris Hill. I really think a lot of Chris. He's a smart guy, and I'm not up here, I'm running my race, but I will say that I do think he understands. I think that Bill Blackman, I think that these guys, if we can take that board back, I think we're going to make a difference up there. And so if we get somebody on that board to redirect that funding, we can put it in the right place. I think that's what we need to be looking at.
So your stance is to bring it back, because Woodard, his stance was to bring it back, and after his election, he let it slide under the rug, and nothing else came about from him for it.
Well, like I said, that's going to be up to the commissioners. But then on the other hand, I do believe that with the, I don't think that the will of the board right now is to change anything. And so I'm hoping that with this upcoming election that the will of that board's going to change and that we can look for something. I think that's important for us to get out here and support people that are going to be, to use it for what it was intended for. And if it's not, it's just, I hate to say it, it's just a tax right now, going into the general